The Armenian Genocide by Crystal He. In the Middle Ages, Christian Armenians and Muslim Kurds lived together in eastern Anatolia's mountain plateau. This area was under Armenian rule, though invasions were not uncommon during this time. Armenia was integrated into the Ottoman Empire in the 15th and 16th century, though Armenians still kept the strong sense of identity that the Ottoman millet system protected. The millet system protected minority religious communities' rights, but kept them under Ottoman administration. By the 20th century, Armenians resided in the Ottoman Empire and in a territory near the Russian border where they were considered second-class citizens. Some Armenian families were able to reach great financial success in the Muslim-dominated society, though this caused resentment and suspicion among the Muslims. The presence of Armenians residing in Russian territory, coupled with their financial successes, led the Ottomans to suspect the Armenian loyalty to the empire, leading to mass violence. This left tens of thousands of Armenian people injured or deceased. In 1908, a group called the Young Turks had taken over the leadership of the Committee of Union and Progress, CUP, which was the group that governed the Ottoman Empire. Over time, the Young Turks grew more violent, nationalistic, and steadily became more suspicious of the Armenians. They wanted a nation that contained only Turkish and Muslim people and culture. As World War I began, the Young Turks joined the Central Powers to fight against the Triple Entente. Armenian men were targeted for conscription, and on April 24, 1915, the first large-scale massacre and deportations of Armenians began, thus beginning the genocide. The Young Turks blamed Armenians for the losses experienced in the war and disarmed the Armenian soldiers to send them off to labor battalions. These soldiers were then systematically executed. Mass killings of Armenians took place in villages. The Armenian leaders feared that self-defense would escalate the violence, so they opted to maintain calm, refraining from retaliation. On April 18, 1915, the Turkish governor of Van district ordered Armenians to hand over all the weapons that they possessed. The Armenians recognized that they would be much more vulnerable without arms, so they refused, choosing to barricade themselves in the city instead. The Armenians in Van were able to defend themselves from the Turkish, though the Armenians that resided in nearby villages were massacred. When Russia captured Van, a month after the initial order from the Young Turks to surrender Armenian weapons, they found over 55,000 corpses in the area. On April 24, 1915, Talat Pasha, the leader of the Young Turks, ordered for the mass arrest of hundreds of Armenian intellectuals, activists, politicians, and community leaders, citing the Armenian resistance in Van and other areas for a cause. The captured Armenians were then executed in the following months. Most Armenian men were also killed, as the Young Turks feared that the men would fight back. The Ottoman Empire then began to deport Armenian women and children to concentration camps located in the deserts of Syria under the newly passed Takir law. On the journey to the camps, women were raped and the victims were subjected to extortion, torture, and murder. Many Armenians died before even reaching the camps. Guards would often stop the Armenians at certain sites to be killed off. These sites included the Kama Gorge, where victims would be thrown into rivers from the cliffs above. Eventually, the vast numbers of bodies clogged the river, so the guards would dispose of them in cave systems instead. Once Armenians reached the camps, they passed from disease, starvation, and dehydration. Hundreds of Armenians would be taken out and shot daily. The forced deportation of Armenians continued until around 1916. Some Armenian women and children were also forced to convert to Islam, and Armenian families often had to choose between a son or a daughter to save by sending them off to family outside of the Ottoman Empire. Hundreds of thousands of Armenians fled the Ottoman Empire, and to this day, there are more Armenians living outside of the country than there are inside. By the end of World War I, it was estimated that more than 1 million Armenians had perished, with hundreds of thousands of Armenians left homeless and stateless. 90% of the Armenians in the Ottoman Empire were gone, and their deserted homes were given to Muslim refugees and the newly Islam-converted women and children. The massacre of Armenians continued with varying intensity until the Ottoman Empire collapsed and was replaced by the Republic of Turkey in 1923. Of the over 2 million Armenians that were present before the genocide, less than 400,000 remained in the Republic of Turkey. The CUP leaders were found guilty of many war crimes related to the Armenian genocide and were sentenced to death shortly after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. The leaders fled Turkey, however, most of them were killed by Armenian survivors seeking revenge for their loved ones. To this day, the Turkish government refuses to recognize the Armenian genocide. They have acknowledged the deportations taking place, but refuse to admit that the government directed the massacres. They have also stated that the deportations were necessary to maintain national security. Many countries have acknowledged that what happened to the Armenians was a genocide, though countries such as Israel and Great Britain have also refused to call what happened a genocide to avoid possible diplomatic conflicts with Turkey. Turkey is a part of NATO, which is one of the main factors keeping other NATO allies from calling out Turkey's misconduct with Armenians before, during, and after World War I. The Armenian genocide caused Armenians many significant cultural losses which have little to no possibility of being recovered. There has been no attempt at any financial or social reparations from Turkey, which has caused the nations to have a strained diplomatic relationship. Many Turkish Muslims still believe that the actions against the Armenians were required and warranted for the safety of the empire. Hrant Dink was a Turkish-Armenian journalist that was assassinated in 2007 by a Turkish nationalist for quote-unquote insulting Turks. He wrote and published articles about the Armenian genocide and acknowledged it as a real genocide. To this day, the generational trauma suffered by the families of victims from the Armenian genocide has integrated itself into the contemporary Armenian culture and identity. The first step towards reparation is acknowledging the genocide and educating oneself on the matter, and that process can begin with you.